Hello, my name's Simon Zutshi, and in this video I'm going to share with you why I believe your next property should be a house of multiple occupation, otherwise known as an HMO. That's because with an HMO you get a much higher monthly profit than you do with a single let property. That means you don't need as many properties to be able to replace your income. And also, because there's lots of profit, you can actually pay someone else to do all the management for you. So you get no hassle at all. Now, there are lots of myths about HMOs. I'm going to bust them in this video to make sure you really understand and you can make an informed decision if HMOs are right for you or not. And I believe that now is a fantastic opportunity because of things happening in the market, which I'll also explain in more detail in this video. Now, this is actually the first video of a three-part series, and I'm filming it sitting in the living room of one of my HMOs. And in one of the videos, I'm going to give you a bit of a tour of this property so you can understand exactly what an HMO should look like and how it's different from a normal type of property. Now, most people start investing using single let properties, and HMOs are seen very much as a more advanced strategy. Now, as someone who doesn't have any properties yet, you might be thinking, do I really want to do a more advanced strategy, an HMO for my first deal? And I can understand that thinking. In fact, some people say, look, get yourself a couple of single let properties, make sure you like property, and then you can move on to more advanced HMOs. And whilst I understand the logic there, I also think, why would you take all the time and effort and put money into one deal that might only make you £100 or £200 profit a month as a single let, whereas with just a little bit more knowledge and a little bit more effort, your next property, your first property, could be giving you £1,000 profit per month. And in reality, you don't need many of those to replace your income. So whilst I get the theory about starting with singlets moving on to HMOs, well, actually, I don't think that's the best use of your time or your money. Now, you might be thinking, yes, but I need to learn this stuff. Well, we can help you learn all about this. And in fact, I'm going to share with you in these three videos ways that you can actually try out an HMO without actually buying it to make sure it's the right strategy for you. Now, before I talk too much more about HMOs, I think it's important I tell you a little bit about who I am and what my experience is. I believe if you're watching a YouTube video or you're listening to a podcast, you need to understand, does the person speaking actually know what they're talking about? Well, look, I've been investing in property since 1995, and I got my first student HMO in 1998. That's almost 25 years ago. And I was able to replace my income and leave my full-time job at Cadbury's in 2001. And in 2003, I set up the very first networking anywhere in the UK explicitly for property investors. And I called it the Property Investors Network. And that one meeting is now going to 50 meetings all around the UK, and we're actually now spreading around the world as well. So I've kind of helped a lot of people because since 2003, I've been teaching people just like you how to do what I did. I replaced my income, but much quicker than I did it. And so I'd like to share with you in these next three videos a little bit about how you can really accelerate that process of replacing your income much quicker than I did it. In fact, if you listen to these three videos and take action on them, there's a pretty good chance you could probably replace your income in the next 12 months. Because with HMOs, you really don't need that many properties. Now, let me tell you about my very first HMO. And I was actually living in Selly Oak in Birmingham, just next to Birmingham University. I was working at Cadbury's, and I was renting out two of the rooms to my friends who were still studying university. And the rent they paid pretty much covered the mortgage and all of the bills. So I had money building up in my bank account. And also, I was running a part-time business running student nightclub events in Birmingham. It was a great, fun business to run at that age and a really good cash generator. So I had this money building up in my business bank account. And my business bank manager said, look, what are you going to do with this money? Do you want to invest it? I thought, well, that's a good idea. And he arranged for one of the top financial advisors in the Midlands for this particular bank to come and sit down with me and have a talk about how I could use this money best. There was a guy called Kevin. He gave me some great advice about setting up some insurance. I didn't have that in place. He set up a pension for me. And when it came to using this money, he said, what do you want to do? Do you want to put it in stocks, shares? How can we help you? And I said, well, actually, Kevin, I'm thinking about moving out of this house and away from the student area and buying a slightly bigger house closer to where I work at Cadbury's. And once I explained to Kevin how much I was going to buy the next house for, and how much this current house was worth, and how much equity was there, Kevin said, Simon, I've got some great news for you. I've done some figures here, and it looks like you're going to be able to buy this new house, and you're not going to need a very big mortgage. You can use the savings in your bank. When you sell this house, the equity you're going to get, you can put it towards the new one, and you have a very small mortgage. You can pay your mortgage down quickly, and that's a great thing to do. And actually, Kevin was right. If you're only ever going to have one property, i.e. your home, paying it off as quick as you can is a really good thing to do because you have a lot more money in later life. However, I guess I'd been influenced by my very first student landlord when I had been a student living in student property. Now you've got to understand that none of my family have ever invested in property apart from their own homes. I don't have any friends who had invested, so this was all new to me. But I remember talking to my student landlord and understanding the basic concept that you buy a house and you rent it out, and the rent is more than all the costs. You make profit on each house. It's like each house being a cash machine. So I understood the theory even if I didn't have any experience. And my house was right next to Birmingham University where I'd been living for a few years. And because of my student business, I was pretty confident I'll be able to find students to move into this house to live there. So some of the problems that many people worry about, can I find tenants? Are they going to trash the house? I wasn't really worried about those. So I explained this plan to Kevin. Now, remember, Kevin was the top financial advisor for this particular bank in the entire Midlands area. And he looked at me and said, Simon, so let me understand this way. And bear in mind, this was the very end of 1997. Buy-to-let mortgages weren't really around. Most people, including Kevin, didn't really know about property. There weren't all these TV programs. The internet wasn't really around. Property investing was not well known then. And Kevin looked at me and said, so hang on a minute. You're not going to sell the house that we're in at the moment. You're going to keep that. You're going to buy another one. You're going to move into other. You're going to rent this first one to students. I said, yes, that's right. And he looked at me for what seemed like an eternity, and he said, that sounds awfully risky to me. Now you got to imagine, I was like mid-20s, and this financial advisor, a lot older than me, who I know is the top financial advisor for this particular bank in the Midlands, is saying what I'm about to do is really risky. And I must admit, it kind of challenged my thinking. And I thought, do I really want to do this? And then I remembered my student landlord. I remember how he had all these properties and he lived in a very nice big house. He went lots of nice holidays. I thought, yeah, what could go wrong? I'm going to give this a try. And so I moved out of that first house. I turned it into a 3-bed student HMO, moved into my new home with my friends. And actually, it was all pretty painless. I was worried about, will I find tenants? Well, I found tenants pretty easily. I was worried about, will they pay me the rent? And sure enough, the rent arrived the first month, and it was there the second month, and it just came into my bank account every month. I was worried about, would it take lots of my time? And in fact, I used to pop in on the property because I was in the area once a month just to make sure, because I hadn't heard from the tenants, to make sure everything was okay. And everything was fine. It was a lovely house. They were looking after it. And so it was a very, very painless experience for me. And I thought, this is good. I should do more. But the real light bulb moment was this. You see, at the time, I was working at Cadbury's. I'd finished the graduate training program. I'd become a senior manager. And I was earning about £1,500 a month. That was what I was earning for my full-time job. I spent all my time doing. And yet, this one property, which took me maybe less than an hour a month, and I'd just pop in as I walked past to make sure it was okay, was making me £500 a month. So I was putting all my time and effort in, earning £1,500, and for 1 hour a month, earning £500. I thought, hang on, if I had some more of these, maybe I don't have to go to work. So I started to buy some more houses. And actually, I bought single-let properties because I didn't know that I had an HMO. I didn't really understand the numbers. I just knew it was making money. And I think a lot of people get into property because they're making money, but they don't really educate themselves properly. And I had no choice. There was no internet then. There were no courses. There were probably some books about property investing, but why would you read a book about investing? Right? Surely anyone can buy a property, and any idiot can do it, and many idiots do it. And I really didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I was making money. So I bought another single let and another one, and I bought a few more properties. And by 2001, I'd got to the point where I hadn't replaced my income from Cadbury's, but I had enough to live off. And I was still doing my student nightclub business. And I thought, you know what? Although I love Cadbury's, I like the people, I like the company, I love the product, I thought, actually, I just want a bit more freedom. And maybe you love what you do, but you'd like a bit more freedom and choice in your life. So I took the brave and some would say stupid decision to actually quit my full-time job. That was in 2001. And by 2003, I'd replaced my income completely. And it wasn't actually until 2005, so 10 years after I started investing, I looked back at my portfolio. And by the way, I'd started PIN in 2003, started teaching other people how to invest and how to do what I had done. So I thought I knew pretty much everything about property. But there's a great saying I want to share with you is you don't know what you don't know. And I looked back over my portfolio, I was doing some numbers, and I had this real distinction. I realized that that first property, that HMO, was very little work for me, but it was making far more than any other property. So in 2005 and 2006, I started to grow my HMO portfolio. And actually the house we're sitting in right now is one of those houses I bought. I think I bought it back then for about £130,000. Now, it was just a 3-bedroom house at the time. But what we did, we converted one of the reception rooms into a bedroom. We put a bathroom at the back of the house. We went up into the attic. It cost at that time about £30,000. Now, obviously, it would cost a lot more to buy a house now, cost a lot more to do the work now, but the principle's the same. So spent 130 on it, cost me about 30-ish to do the work, so 160. I increased the value to 200,000. Now, at the time, we could get 85% loan to value mortgages. So the value of 200, I could get a mortgage of 170. What that meant was I was able to recycle all of my money and go and buy another property. And that's the way you can quickly build your portfolio. Now, obviously the numbers are bigger these days, and sometimes you can't get all of your money out. But the point is, rather than putting money into a property like a single let property where you're probably going to leave it there, with an HMO, you can recycle it, take it out and go into another one and quickly build your portfolio. So that's how I started in my HMOs. Now, very often people wonder, well, who actually live in these kind of properties? And a lot of people, when they think about HMOs, they think about students. And that was my thinking at first, because students, they come to university, they live in a hall of residence in their first year. They often want a bit of independence. They move into a house with a group of friends from their course or people they met in their first year. And a lot of people think, oh, HMOs, you're talking about students. But that's just one of 4 types of tenants you can get in an HMO. So students in the first. The next group, and actually the people that live in this particular house, are what we call young professionals. So those are people who they've been to university, they've got a degree, and they're in a career or a profession. They could be a teacher, they could be a nurse, they could be a doctor, an engineer, an accountant, you get the idea. They're someone who's been at university and thus they've lived with other people in a shared house before. They quite like that community feeling. And they might move to a new city for their career, somewhere where they don't really know anyone. And what that means is by moving into a shared house like this, not only is it more cost effective for them than living on their own, but also they meet some people who could be a bit of an instant social life for them, some new friends in a new city. So young professionals, great market, and most of my HMOs are either students or they're young professionals. There are also people who are just working people. They haven't necessarily been to university. Nothing wrong with not going to university. Some people just start work straight away instead. They might be working in factories, offices, shops, restaurants, etc. And these people have probably been living at home before they come into an HMO. So that's the only difference. They may not have experienced living in a kind of community like this before. And obviously, I have working people, mix of young professionals, absolutely no problem at all. And then the fourth group of potential tenants in an HMO are people who are on benefits. Now, I don't have this type of tenant in my HMOs. I do have some of my single let properties with benefit tenants, and some of them are fantastic. They look after property, they're there for life. The council pays me direct. It works really well. In an HMO, it is a bit more work, and having people sitting around who are maybe not at work each day, they kind of wind each other up. An NHA benefit HMO is more work than a normal type of HMO, but many of my students have actually taken an HMO, they've then rented it to a charity who specialises in housing vulnerable people. Now, this is a win-win for everyone. My students get a really good income from the property and they know they're helping people. The charity get the much needed housing stock to look after these vulnerable people, and the vulnerable people are in a nice, safe house that's looking after them, and often they struggle to find accommodation. So it's a real win-win for everyone. My big tip here is don't mix tenant types. Either you've got students, or you've got young professionals and working people, or you've got LHA tenants. Now, the type of tenants you get in very much depends on the location. If you want students, it's got to be very close to the university because they want that convenience. Young professionals, working people, they want good transport links, good local facilities and amenities. And then LHA, not so important really because, there's a desperate shortage of that kind of accommodation and they're not so fussy. But it's important to understand who lives in these properties. The next thing I want to make sure you understand is how much can you actually make? And this is an important thing. This is why you should be doing HMOs. A single let property might make you anywhere between 100 and 200 pounds. Now, some single lets, they don't really make any money at all by the time you take the cost into account. If you're looking up north, you might find some that might make you 350 pounds, best case scenario, but that's unlikely. Most single let properties are going to make 100 to 200 pounds. Now, there are different types of HMOs. Let me talk you through them and explain roughly how much they make. So a minimo is a small HMO, typically 3 or 4 bedrooms. It only really works in areas where you've got a cheap property in the first place, and then someone moves in, they pay you rent. By the way, as a landlord, you generally pay all of the bills included as part of the rent. So the bills for a 3-bed house are not that much different from a 5-bed house, but in a 5-bed house, you can spread them amongst more people. So therefore, a minimo only really works in a cheap area where you've got a low cost of mortgage. So a minimo might make you £500 per month. A normal HMO, by normal I mean a 5-bed, which is a typical kind of HMO, should make you about £1,000 a month profit. A larger HMO, by that I mean more than 7 bedrooms, and that's actually a different type of planning. It's seen as a sui generis planning. That then should make you more like £2,000 plus per month. And here's a big tip for you. You see, let's say you've got a 5-bedroom or a 6-bedroom property. When you get 1 extra room in that property and get an extra £500 a month, let's say, most of that £500 is extra profit, because there's not that much cost of having that extra room and extra person in the property. So therefore, those extra few rooms can really increase your profit. So larger HMOs, typically 7 or more rooms, might be making 2,000 plus. And then finally, there are mega HMOs. If you've got 10, 12 or more rooms, some of my clients have got properties where they're making £3,000 to £5,000 profit per month. Let me say that again. £3,000 to £5,000 profit per month. That's what we call a life-changing deal. Now, that's not going to be your first deal, obviously, but once you've built up a bit of experience, it might be your 3rd or 4th deal. And this particular property is a 5-bed. So let me run you through the numbers on this. So the rental income, it varies on room to room. Some of the rooms have what we call an ensuite, where they've got their own shower, hand basin and toilet. They get slightly a higher rent. Bigger rooms get a higher rent as well. If they're a smaller room and don't have an ensuite, it's a lower rent. So my lowest rent for my smallest room in this particular house is £500 per calendar month. We then have a couple of rooms at 550 is the most expensive room, and then we have I think one at 525 and one at 510. So the total rental income when the house is full, when it's fully occupied, is £2,635. Now, the best will in the world, you don't always have a property that's fully occupied. I've got 1 room empty in this one at the moment because we've actually just completely refurbished this property and we're just filling the house up again. So I've got 1 room empty at the moment. But I like to factor in that you're going to have what we call some void periods. The nature of the tenants is sometimes they're quite transitory. They come for a period of time. They might move on for a new job, or they move in with a partner, or that kind of thing, or they just move in with some new friends. So I like to factor in maybe 10% voids. Now, you shouldn't get more than 10%. If you're getting more than 10%, there's something wrong. Maybe you're trying to charge too much rent, or the property's not up to spec, or it's not the right kind of area. But if we take off 10%, it means the net rent's about £2,372. Then you've got to take off management. Now, one of the reasons that people think, oh, I don't want to do HMOs, I've heard they're lots of work. And I believe that, yeah, one HMO is more time and effort required than one single let property. I completely agree with that. However, I think it's a bit of an unfair comparison, because whilst one HMO can make you, let's say, £1,000 a month, and a single let might only make you 100, maybe £200 profit. Well, this single let makes you the HMO makes you 5 times as much money. And so think about it. Do you think that the HMO is going to be 5 times the work that a single let's going to be? Well, no, it's not. If you had 5 single lets, that would be the same income as one HMO, but I bet you those 5 single lets would be more work than that one HMO. I hope that kind of makes sense. But having said that, I don't manage any of my properties. You see, if I manage my properties myself, it would be a full-time job. And actually, if I had wanted a full-time job, I would have stayed at Cadbury's, because that's a great job, pays really well, and you get lots of free chocolate. Whereas you don't often get free chocolate when you're managing properties. Sometimes at Christmas, your tenants might buy you a bottle of wine or some chocolates and things, which is quite nice. But I didn't get into property to be a property manager. Now, at first, I was managing my properties because I was trying to get income, and I didn't really want to give it to a letting agent. But actually, when you get enough properties, you can then get someone else to manage them for you. And that's what I do. And I have a great manager in Birmingham because I have a number of properties with her. I pay her 8% plus VAT each month on the rental income. So if we take 10% off for the management as well, the net income is £2,135 a month. So that's take off voids, take off management. Now, in an HMO, you generally pay the bills. In a student HMO, sometimes the students pay, but generally in HMOs, you pay the bills. So that's the council tax, it's the gas, the electric, the TV license, all those kind of things. Now, my rule of thumb for approximating the cost, which works pretty well on 5 or 6 bed HMOs, is for every room, the bills are about £100 per month. So if you have a 5-bedroom property, like this one, it would be about £500 a month. Now, in reality, the bills on this particular property are about £550. So if you take the £550 off, that leaves me £1,585. I also have to pay for the mortgage. Now, when we do our calculations, we assess a mortgage on about a 6% interest rate. Now, obviously, mortgages are less than that at the moment, and my mortgage on this property is only about £400 per month. So I make almost £1,200 per month. That's £1,185 profit per month. And I'm not involved in the management. That's allowing for void periods and after all the bills. So think about that. If you made £1,200 profit per month, you wouldn't need many properties to replace your income. In fact, below this video, there's a little link to a very simple PDF document, which I encourage you to click on that link, download this. It's a very, very simple process. It gets you to think about how much you want to earn, how much you can earn from your HMOs, and help you work out, well, how many HMOs do you actually need to replace your income? And I really encourage you to go through that exercise, because hopefully you'll realise that if you buy the right kind of property, you don't need many of these properties to completely replace your income. And once you've replaced your income, get a few more properties, you replace your time, and you can start spending your time doing whatever you want. So I really encourage you to click on the link and download that PDF and go through the exercise once you've watched this video, because it'll be really enlightening and hopefully encouraging to see actually maybe you're not that far from financial independence. Now you might be saying, this sounds great, Simon, but hang on a minute. Aren't there lots and lots of HMOs? Isn't there an oversupply of HMOs? Well, to a certain extent, I agree. In fact, in most areas, there are lots of HMOs available, and there are empty properties have got some empty rooms and things, and you might think, oh, some of these landlords are struggling. Why on earth would I want to get a property like that? I don't want to struggle. I don't want to have empty rooms. Well, I want to make an important distinction here. There are lots of HMOs. In fact, there's probably an oversupply of HMOs in the market. However, most of them are very average HMOs. What do I mean by that? Well, they've got magnolia walls. They've not got very nice furniture. They're not in the best condition. And so there's lots of properties like this, and tenants look around and think, well, I don't really want to live here. So either the tenants go for the cheapest property, or if they're a bit more discerning, as many are, they'll try and find the best property they can within their budget. So whilst there are many HMOs, there's an oversupply of HMOs, I believe if you want to start doing HMOs, you want to have high-end HMOs and what we call co-living. So for example, this property I'm sitting in, we've got featured wallpaper, we've got nice furniture, we've got working areas, so it's a kind of this co-living. It's not just a room in a house. People are coming into a community. And this is one of the reasons that people like HMOs. And actually, now I believe we're going to see an increase in demand for HMOs, partly because during COVID and the lockdowns, there were a lot of people who were living on their own. They might have their own flat. And, when lockdown came, that was very isolating. And people actually want to have a bit of community. And if they come and live in somewhere, there's not just a room and a house, but it's a community they're becoming part of. In some of my houses, the tenants get on so well, they actually go shopping together, they cook together, they take it in turns to help, and they become a real community. And when you have a community in your house, people tend to stay a long time. The only reason they leave is if they relocate somewhere else, or maybe they decide to buy their first house. So some of my tenants have been in my properties for years and years and years, and they absolutely love it. And guess what? When someone moves, they often find new tenants for me, because rather than having strangers move in, they've got friends of theirs who would love to move into a good quality house. So if you're going to do HMOs, you don't want to be like everybody else doing vanilla magnolia walls and the boring furniture. You got to make it look different so it stands out. And if you have a better quality property, not only can you charge more rent, but you have lower void periods and your tenants stay longer. And in fact, you can sometimes get 30 to 40% above the average rent in the area. And I'm going to show you a lot more about this in the next video, so you can work out exactly how much could you make in your area using HMOs, but that's going to be in the next video. The other reason people like to live in HMOs is because, it's very cost effective. If someone lives on their own in an apartment, a one bed or a studio, they've got to pay the rent and they've got to pay all the bills. And that's going to be at least 200, if not 300 pounds per month. So it's very expensive to live on your own. However, in a shared house like this, you come in and you pay one amount each month. That's the rent and all the bills covered. So what that means is it's far more cost effective to live in a house like this, which means it's great for students, it's great for young professionals who are just starting out in their career. And particularly, a lot of people are worried about the cost of living these days. We've seen inflation higher than it's ever been. And I think inflation and prices are going to go up and up. And when prices go up, people have less money, people have to pull their belts in. So living in shared accommodation is actually more cost effective than living on their own. So for these two reasons, I think we're going to see an increase in demand of people wanting to live in HMOs. Now, this means actually there's a huge opportunity. Obviously, it's always good to invest where you're getting an increasing demand. But you might think, what about all these other landlords? Well, there's something happening right now. And, with 50 plus PIN meetings all over the UK, I've got a slightly unique position that I've got my ear to the ground all over the UK and I hear what's going on. And I also have other peers who I speak to in the industry who are dealing with lots of landlords and letting agents. And there is a real trend in the market at the moment that we are seeing many landlords selling up their properties. Now, why are they doing that? These might be people who are accidental landlords. They might just have one property, or maybe they've been in it for 20, 30 years and they're starting to sell some of their portfolio. You think, well, hang on, if they're selling, why do I want to get in? Well, it's interesting. This happened for a number of reasons. First of all, there's something called Section 24, which if you watched some of my videos before, I'm sure you'll have heard about. It's the tax changes that came in April 2017, where if you own a property in your own name, which was the best way to own property, and if you've got a mortgage, which most investors have, and if you're high rate taxpayers, which again, once you've got lots of property, you're going to be earning lots of money, you're going to be a high rate taxpayer. So if you've got your own property in your own name, you've got a mortgage, and you're a high rate taxpayer, Section 24 basically means you're going to pay a lot more tax on the income you make from your property. So for that reason, some people have moved into a corporate company structure, which I think is one of the reasons the government have done this. They don't want millions of independent landlords. They want fewer companies and institutions who own and manage property because they can tax them and legislate in a much easier way. So that's a definite trend of the government. So as a result of this, over the last few years, we've seen landlords kind of selling up. There's also increasing legislation coming in. There are more and more things that landlords need to be aware of and looking after. Also, because we've had all this money printed due to the help the government's given everyone through this COVID pandemic in 2020 and 2021, we are seeing interest rate rises. Now, only very, very small, and I don't think we're going to see massive interest rate rises because, frankly, the government who's got all this debt, they cannot afford interest rates to go up too much. But having said that, you know, when we have high inflation, historically, the Bank of England has used interest rates as a macroeconomic tool. When inflation goes up, the Bank of England raises interest rates to cool the economy down. So whilst that's going to not happen as much as before, I think over time we're going to see interest rates going up. And when interest rates go up, landlords think, hey, I'm going to be paying more on my mortgage, getting less profit from my property each month. Now, because there is lots of competition, I said there are lots of HMOs out there, for example, there are lots of single-let properties. As a landlord, it's important to make sure we maintain our property and spend money. You know, it cost me, I think, about £12,000 to refurb this property and bring it up to scratch to be able to increase the rents. But now we're charging a lot more rent, we've got lower void periods, so it's worth investing in your portfolio to maintain it and look after it long term. However, unfortunately, there are lots of landlords who might have been in the industry a long time and they don't like spending a lot of money on their property. That's because they've got this great rental income coming in. If they've got to spend money, it means they've got less cash coming in. So for this reason, it means that over time, most people's properties kind of deteriorate. So it's really important to keep them up to standard. But actually, this is a great opportunity for you that I'm going to come to in just a moment. And finally, the last 10 years, we've seen really good capital growth. The last 10 years, most property has probably doubled in value. And if you go and do some research yourself, go onto Google, look for the Land Registry house price records, you see that over the last 60 years or so, about every 10 years, on average, property prices double. Now, it kind of depends when you buy and where you buy, but it is an average that happens in the UK. So what that means is you've got a lot of people who are feeling, well, I'm not sure if now is such a good time to be investing in property. I'm paying more taxes, but there's increased legislation. You know, they might be worried about more COVID and pandemics and things. They don't want to spend money on their property. They've had really good growth, and maybe now's the time for them to cash in. And you know, people are doing other investments in stock market. People are getting into cryptocurrency. So we're seeing lots of people cashing in their properties, or maybe just living off the money because they're retiring. So this is an incredible opportunity for you. And I think this year, more than ever before, we've got the opportunity to find people that have got tired properties and they want to get out of the game, they want to retire. We can take those properties on, do some very minor cosmetic work to the property and transform it into a desirable place that people not only want to rent, but they're prepared to pay more rent than other places. So this is an incredible opportunity for you and everyone who really wants to get involved and really step up and massively increase their profit. In fact, in the next video, video number 2, I'm going to explain to you how using HMOs, you can triple your rental profits. You definitely want to be watching the next video. In the meantime, I do hope you've gained some real value from this. And I'd love it if there should be a box below here. Maybe you could write a comment. What did you think about the video, or any questions you've got, and I'll come and try and answer some of those for you. And maybe if you like this, maybe you can share this on social media because other people need to hear about this. You see, a lot of people have all these beliefs about what you can and can't do in property, and a lot of it's incorrect. And particularly when it comes to something like HMOs, there are always myths about what you can and can't do. And in fact, in the next video, as well as sharing how you can triple your rental profit, I'm going to answer some of the frequently asked questions all about HMOs to show you exactly how you should be doing this. So I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Please do come and comment below. Now also, if you like the video, why not like it? and also hit on the bell icon, because I do lots of free training like this on this YouTube channel. It might be worth you subscribing to make sure you don't miss the free content when it comes out. Also, make sure you click on the link below this video, because there's that download I talked about that will help you work out how many properties do you actually need to get to the point of financial freedom. I think you're going to find that really rewarding. So look for the link. It's going to be somewhere below the description, somewhere below the video in the description. And I've lined up another video for you. And video number 2 in this 3-part series is going to come out very soon. So if you hit the bell icon and like and subscribe, you'll be notified when that comes out. In the meantime, I'd encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill, and enjoy the next video, which is a case study all about one of my students who's been really successful doing this. And actually they've generated over £100,000 of profit within 1 year. Now that's residual profit every year because they've been investing in HMOs. I think you'll find it really enlightening. Enjoy the next video. I do hope you've enjoyed watching this video. And look, if you want to learn more about houses of multiple occupation and how you can really profit using them, I've got some extra online training that I'd like to give you access to. So all you have to do is click in the link in the description below the video, and you can come and register and get access to that training, which will give you far more detail and really help you save a lot of time and make some real shortcuts to make sure you're getting the next HMO property much, much quicker. So click on the link right now and come and register for that extra bonus training with me. In the meantime, I've also lined up another video here I think you'll find really useful. So until the next video, remember to invest with knowledge, invest with skill.